Hey everybody, welcome to KTAL News Now. I'm your host Anthony Mocklin, and today is Tech Tuesday, where we'll be covering a variety of tech news, gaming, as well as a little bit of astrological news. We have news about Amazon's warehouses. We have the new EA basketball game that they just announced, as well as NASA and their sort of space elevator that they're kind of working on, as well as Uber and their venture into the self-driving car world. Starting off with EA Sports announced that they are implementing a college basketball game 16 years after their last one, which was 2009's NCAA Basketball 10. They announced that the game would most likely release in 2028, which is a while away, but it's still pretty exciting for fans of college sports video games. 2K, who is known for their NBA 2K video games, is also plans to make one. Their last game was College Hoops 2K8 in 2007. EA last year revived the college football video game College Football 25, which the last one before that was in 2013, and that one made so much money. It was a huge hit. It made over $1 billion in revenue last year from sales and merchandise and everything. It was huge for the gaming community. This is something that people have been asking for over a decade, since the last one ended in 2013. So it's really cool to see that make a comeback, and based on early reviews of the newest one, which releases next week, College Football 26, they made a lot of improvements over the year after listening to fans, and improvements in primarily the Dynasty mode, where you can kind of create and manage your own team and the players on them, as well as the Road to Glory mode, where you can create your own player and kind of live that road to from high school to becoming a starter on a powerhouse college team. The difficulties with that mode feature from 1 star to 5 stars, depending on how readily available your player wants to be at the college level. If you're an underdog type, you can start with a lower star rating and kind of try to work your way up the depth chart and fight for a spot on the field and get some reps in. So it's really exciting to see that improvements are coming to modes across the board, the two most important modes in the game, in my opinion, that people are particularly drawn to. I know that the Dynasty mode is probably the biggest one that people are asking for, just because they want that sort of control and management over a team, whether it's rebuilding a lesser known team to make them into this championship contender, instead of, just going the easy route and picking Alabama, Georgia, teams that are already established, to kind of have that runway to success. So that was really exciting. Uber is implementing they're getting into the self-driving game along with Waymo. They're in talks right now to have a deal with Pony AI, who is It was an AI software company that was originally founded here in the United States, in Silicon Valley, but now its operations primarily reside in China, even though it is publicly traded in the United States still. This comes in news of Tesla rolling out their sort of automated driving system, but people are, worried that they might not be able to catch up with Waymo, who is currently the industry leader in terms of robotic driving or automated driving. So it would be interesting to see if, as big as Uber is in terms of ride sharing and Uber Eats and in that field, if they can sort of match that sort of dominance in that field when it comes to automated driving. It's a pretty scary thought, honestly, to have a driver not behind the wheel. But I think in the long run, if cars start to have this sort of automated driving, it might actually reduce wrecks rather than, people being mistrusting of getting behind or getting in the car of a, with no driver in it. If those automated cars can continue to kind of talk to each other and, coordinate whether if they're making a turn or they're about to cross an intersection after a stop sign, I think in the long run, it will lead to less fatal crashes anyway, compared to now, whereas you have that human element behind the wheel. You never know what the other person is going to do, whereas the automated drivers can kind of communicate and be on the same page when it comes to driving in any situation. And speaking of robotics, Amazon just announced that they have created or hired their 1 millionth robot worker, which in the near future, robots will soon surpass the amount of human workers at their warehouses, because as of now in the United States, across Amazon warehouses, they employ a little over 1.5 million human beings. But with that robotic number quickly increasing, it will be interesting to see how that sort of changes the landscape of warehouse working and employment in that field, as robots and AI are sort of a threat to jobs everywhere at the moment. But the Amazon warehouse robots sort of help with the packing and lifting heavy objects that would normally be pretty harmful for humans to do on their own. So it's very helpful in that aspect to kind of lift the burden off of the day-to-day and the wear and tear of a human. I'm not really sure what that means for the rest of the job market, which is already a pretty big mess. I'm not sure if, because Amazon was basically saying that they're not trying to replace them, they're just trying to ease the burden, which I'm not sure how true that is, to be honest with you. I know that it's one of the biggest companies on the planet, and they make billions and billions of dollars. They ship millions and millions of packages each day. So I think at the end of the day, it probably is going to end up being all about profit, unfortunately. But I'm not sure what that means for the rest of the workforce, if their jobs also get replaced by robots or automation, because it's great that, these jobs that people typically, don't really want to do get replaced and they don't have to do them anymore. But at the same time, how are they going to make money to kind of make a living and pay for their bills and their day-to-day lives and rent and housing and put food on the table? It'll be interesting to see what the alternative would be, or if Amazon is sort of offering a solution to those displaced by robots, or for other methods. It will be very interesting to see. NASA Plus is joining Netflix this summer, where Netflix subscribers can look at live programming from NASA, which includes rocket launches, spacewalks, and mission coverages, as well as a 24/7 live feed from Earth. Now, the NASA Plus streaming service is already available for free on NASA's website. This is just giving people another avenue to kind of view them through Netflix, since they are already, subscribers, or just have another platform to kind of watch on their phone instead of having to go to a browser or a web page, which is really cool to see. I'm personally very interested in space, and which brings me to my next topic of the space elevator that is being talked about and theorized that would connect the Earth to the moon. And the way it is being talked about being constructed is that in typical movies and historical films, you see this sci-fi version of a space elevator that connects the Earth to the moon seamlessly instead of having to use a rocket ship to kind of launch themselves into orbit and into space to get there. But the space elevator that's being proposed would consist of a cable, essentially, that would anchor onto the moon and pretty much end right outside of Earth's orbit to not burn up in the atmosphere or get pulled into it. So that end would sort of kind of be freely flowing around in space while the other end would be anchored to the moon. And that cable would have to be 26,000 miles long in order for it to efficiently work in a practical way. The reason why it can't be tethered to the Earth currently is because scientists say we do not have the materials that are strong enough to sort of anchor it to the Earth and bring us up there. So unfortunately, even if this elevator gets developed, at the moment we cannot reliably get to it without having to still propel ourselves through a rocket ship from the Earth, which is usually the most expensive, the most fuel-consuming part of space travel, is just fighting against the gravity of Earth to get up off the ground and into orbit. And the theory with the elevator is that a lighter sort of cord would tether to the moon, and what's called the Lagrange point, which is where the gravity cancels out between the moon's orbit and Earth's orbit, to where each side is pulling, but in that sort of center place, you're kind of freely floating around, you're not being pulled each way. So the theory is to get to that point and then essentially take the elevator the rest of the way. And just by doing that, it would reportedly reduce fuel costs of a normal launch by over 2/3, which is huge considering it's not accounting for or trying to fix the problem of getting up off of the Earth, which takes the most amount of fuel. Because you're only getting to that Lagrange point, whereas in a normal takeoff, you would have to account for fuel consumption to get all the way to the moon and all the way back instead of just riding that elevator to and from that point. And the reason, and I know people may have some questions on, what if the cord kind of gets like wrapped around the moon, which, at least to my knowledge, is not physically possible because of what's known as tidal locking, where the moon does orbit around the Earth and it does spin on an axis, but it also matches the spin rate of Earth, so that the moon hemisphere that you're seeing will always be the same hemisphere no matter where you are on the Earth or what time of day it is. So if the Earth is spinning, you're kind of only seeing that side of the moon the entire time because of this tidal locking. So the cord would always be pointing toward Earth instead of being kind of like wrapped around it at any point, or if there is anything like that. So it won't wind up at all. The only issue is obviously with a cord that long, 26,000 miles, would be accounting for, unnatural patterns with the rest of space, whether it be asteroids or any sort of other forces at play that might interfere with it. It would also be extremely thin. I've heard people were saying that it would be around the diameter of lead in a pencil, which is insane to think about at the moment because we don't have the materials to sort of have that foundational, traditional elevator that we would think of to kind of propel us to the moon. But it would offer a variety of different improvements in terms of learning about space as well as cultivating a potential civilization in the future. Because if we can get to the moon freely in that way without having to spend, millions of dollars or fuel, we can sort of establish a base or space telescopes on the moon to kind of get further out from our field of view and view the galaxy from a wider lens without any light pollution besides the sun, since we wouldn't have to go to these remote areas on planet Earth to kind of conduct that research. So that's super exciting. I mean, I think it's a lot closer than people think. You know, people think of this elevator idea as like a pretty wacky idea, but in terms of all the wacky space ideas and theories out there, I believe that this one is one of the more plausible ones. And like I said, it could be here before you know it. You never know with advances in science and technology every single day. And as a huge fan of space, I would love to see this happen, but at the same time, it's a very scary thought to kind of think about this change in a way that would alter the course of not only space travel, but how we understand the universe. So that was all really, really interesting and exciting to me. And if you have any other topics or discussions that you would want me to talk about on the show, you can hit me up at KTAL at KTALnews.com. Any sort of topics or discussions are fair game. It doesn't have to necessarily fit in with the theme of that day's show. It can just be a sort of like a pivot episode or something that you might find interesting that you want to hear more about. So I'm open to anything. Again, you can catch us on KTAL News Now every day, Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining us.